Yo, what is good everyone? My name is Alex and today we are taking a look at the brand new Pixel 5a. But before we get into the details, I want to thank Google for sending this phone out to me to test. However, they did not sponsor or pay for this video, and all of the opinions are my own. So the Pixel 5a was kind of a surprise release. There really wasn't too much press coverage or hype around this device. However, Pixel fans were looking forward to this update, especially since flagship devices keep getting more and more expensive, and the Pixel 5a falls comfortably within that $450 mid-range tier category. So in this video, I'll be going over the specs and my experience with using this device. And of course, as a photographer, I'm going to take a deep dive into this camera system and really pixel peep at those pictures just to see how good these cameras are. So this phone has a metal unibody construction which feels really solid in the hand. Holding it and using it is an amazing experience and nothing about it feels cheap at all. The outer shell has this matte rubberized finish which feels really robust and rugged. The Pixel 5a only comes in this dark forest green color, which they call mostly black. And as someone who loves black hardware, I just really wish that they would have made it pure black. The fingerprint reader is on the back, so you're not getting the latest in-display tech, but this does bring me back to the Nexus days. All of the buttons are super clicky and loud, and the vibration motor is precise and strong. The one thing that I am most excited about with this update is the IP rating. For me, it really is a deal breaker if devices are not IP certified, and to have a phone that is rated IP67 just gives me that extra peace of mind. And as a content creator, I know that I can go out and shoot in any condition. The Snapdragon 765G powers this device, and although it is a last generation chip, the Pixel still flies through everything you throw at it. Especially since this device runs such a clean version of Android, the software experience is really optimized, but I'll get more into that later on. The Pixel 5a comes with 6GB of RAM and 128GB of storage, with no expandable storage option. However, you do get a headphone jack, which is pretty cool to see in 2021. One of the biggest improvements with this update is the battery. The Pixel 5a comes with a 4600 mAh battery. That is really impressive, and battery life is a non-issue. However, there is no wireless charging due to the metal construction, but you do get an 18-watt power brick in the box. So the Pixel cameras have always been pretty amazing with top-tier computational photography. The main camera is a 12-megapixel dual pixel sensor with OIS and a 77 degrees field of view. This is roughly equivalent to a 24mm lens. The ultra-wide has a 16-megapixel sensor with a 118 degrees field of view. That's roughly equivalent to an 11mm lens. Unfortunately, you don't get a telephoto with this phone, and I assume it would have pushed the price up further. Like the rest of this device, the camera setup is solid and minimal. In my early testing, these cameras are really good, and you can definitely see the software magic at work. Let's take a deeper dive and pixel peep at some of these images. Okay, so let's start off with the classic brick wall test. This shot was taken using the main camera, and you can see it looks really good at this view. However, pixel peeping is where you can really tell, so let's zoom in. This is the center at 100%, and it looks sharp. The details in the brick are visible, and everything looks natural without any over sharpening. Moving on to the corners, and they still look decent. There is slight loss of detail, but no real smearing going on. I'm checking every corner, and they all look pretty good. With lenses this small, I thought there would be more loss of quality as it gets into the corners, and I'm glad it's not the case. Next, this is the same brick wall, but shot with the ultra-wide. You can see this image wasn't taken exactly parallel to the wall, but there really is no noticeable distortion. Zooming into the center reveals just as much detail as the main camera. The bricks look good with no over-processing. Even the corners are relatively sharp at 100% to zoom. I am really impressed here. Now let's get into some real-world testing. Pretty much every phone camera looks great in broad daylight, So I decided to test out the Pixel 5a at sunset, and then really push the camera with some night street photography. Before we get into pixel peeping, here are some of my favorite edited photos from the photo walk. I really enjoyed shooting with the Pixel 5a. The shots were neutral, not over-processed at all, and most of them were pretty clean. It was a perfect base for my own post-processing. Okay, now let's look at some unedited images straight out of the Pixel 5a. This first shot was taken a bit past sunset on an overcast day. There really wasn't that much light. So zooming into the fluorescent light, you can see a soft neutral white glow. It is leaning a bit warm, but nothing that looks unnatural. Everything else that is lit naturally looks clean, and the green color in the awning looks true to life. However, as I move toward the shadows, you can start to see some noise. Look at the fire escapes and the trees. Thankfully, this noise seems to mostly be gray and not that distracting color noise. This next image was taken with the ultra-wide of these two USPS trucks. At full view, it looks really good, and the Pixel was even able to recover some of the yellow in the sky. However, zooming in reveals a ton of noise in the shadows, like look at this wheel. But again, it isn't too distracting, it kind of gives it a film look. Again, it was getting pretty dark, and these small sensors really struggle with low light. However, zooming into the middle of this image, I am happy to see a ton of detail retained in the highlights. Look at the rivets on the side of the truck and the lettering on the glass building. Now in the same spot, I used the telephoto option and took this shot of the Freedom Tower in the background. It is said that this phone doesn't have a telephoto lens, and zooming in at 100% reveals the deficiencies. You can see signs of over-sharpening around the buildings as the phone tries to compensate for the digital zoom. It's not the worst digital zoom that I've seen, but I would just try to avoid using this option altogether. For this next shot, I was trying to capture this woman riding a bike past me, but you can see it actually missed the focus. She's out of focus and the buildings in the back are clear. This actually happens a few times later on. Here is another example taken at night where nothing is in focus. From the bottom of the frame all the way to the top, everything just looks blurry. And here's another example with a bit more light, but still, nothing is in focus across the frame. This is a bit concerning, and I hope Google improves it in future updates. However, if this happens, tapping on the screen to refocus the shot usually solves the issue. Now this next one was captured while I was walking. So when pixel peeping, you can see both motion blur in the subjects, but also blur from my camera shake. This is a prime example where a pro mode would have avoided this issue because I would have manual control over the shutter speed. And in contrast, this next shot was taken just a few seconds after, but for this one, I stayed still. And you can see so much more detail in these shots. Just look how sharp the bikes are, and there doesn't even seem to be any noise here. This image was taken using the wide angle lens, and you can see just how well Google is fixing that distortion. There isn't that fisheye effect that you often see in ultra-wide lenses. And of course, zooming into the center reveals a ton of detail in the hair and clothing. This isn't even using night sight yet. All of the sun has pretty much already fully set, and it was getting hard to see. So these next series of images are comparing night sight to the regular images. This shot was taken well after sunset, and it looks like it's still daytime. And just to be clear, this is not using night sight, and there is still a ton of detail when you zoom in to 100%. Now this one is using the night sight mode. You can see slight improvements in clarity, especially in the trees and the graffiti. But the most notable difference is the color temperature shift. The night sight image is significantly warmer, so I actually prefer the regular shot here. Now this next example is of some subway tracks, and again this one is not using night sight. Everything looks pretty dark and there's no detail when you zoom in. In real life, it was really dark and I really couldn't see much. Turning on night sight makes such a huge difference. It looks like a flash had been used for this shot. Zooming in at 100%, you can see so much more detail in the tracks, and when you move around the frame, there's more clarity in the beams up top. Again, the night sight image does look a bit warmer, but it doesn't bother me for this one. However, I did notice that some night sight images get really warm, like this example. Again, hopefully this is something that Google can improve with future software updates. However, it is really unfortunate that the Pixel 5a doesn't have a pro mode. No matter how good the point and shoot experience is, sometimes I just really need those manual controls over settings like shutter speed and ISO. Without a pro mode, you really are limited in the type of shots that you can capture. For example, it's really hard to do panning shots and you won't be able to take long exposures. I know that Google wants to make the shooting experience quick and easy, but I really do hope that Google adds a pro mode for the 6 series. The portrait mode is also pretty good, with clean lines and realistic looking bokeh. Google's portrait mode has always been one of the best, so I'm happy to see that it continues in the 5a. On the front, we have an 8 megapixel selfie camera with a fixed focus. I wish it had autofocus, but I guess it doesn't really matter all that much. Lastly, there is a quick share feature, where right after you take a photo, you can swipe up from the gallery icon and share it directly to social. The Pixel 5a can record up to 4K 60 with the main camera. And as you can see in this example, the OIS works really well and the video is stable. You can also shoot 240 FPS slow motion in 1080p, which is awesome. With the 5a, there is a new video mode called Cinematic Pan. This is supposed to make your pans much smoother, and in my testing works pretty well. I can see this as being really useful for B-roll shots in addition to using my main camera. Unfortunately, you can't record 4K 60 with the ultra-wide camera. Again, this is something that can limit the type of shots that you can take. Another negative is the overheating issue. When using the camera and recording 4K video for extended periods of time, the phone will overheat and stop recording, especially if you're using the cinematic pan or any enhanced stabilization. But to be fair, most flagship phones will overheat, like the OnePlus 9 Pro and Galaxy S21. The Pixel 5a has a 6.34-inch display, which is a bit larger than the previous generation. However, when I'm comparing it against my Galaxy S21, which is pretty much the smallest flagship device that I know of, the 5a isn't that much larger. And as someone who loves smaller devices, I really do hope that manufacturers continue to make more compact flagships. The OLED display looks great, however it is only 1080p and 60Hz. Having a 90Hz or even 120Hz display would have been amazing, but it seems like Google is saving those for the 6 series. The bezels on the Pixel 5a are kind of thick, however you do still get that edge-to-edge immersive experience with the hole punch camera and stereo speakers. The software experience is definitely the highlight of using the Pixel 5a. You're getting the purest form of Android straight from Google without any unnecessary bloatware, apps, or background processes that slow the system down. Launching apps are smooth and navigating around the UI is quick and snappy, even on a 60Hz display. I can only imagine how much more responsive it can feel with a 90 or 120Hz refresh rate. And of course, using a phone that's made by Google, you're gonna get that Google experience. So you get all of the AI and machine learning features like personal safety, call screener, live captions, and top-notch security. Plus, you get 3 years of software support, and being a Pixel, you're definitely first in line for OS updates. Alright, so that's it for this video. What do you guys think? Is the Pixel 5a worth the upgrade? The mid-tier category is pretty crowded, with tons of competition with devices that are cheaper, has newer specs, or has a better design. But coming in at $449, it undercuts the flagship devices by quite a bit. And if you're on a tight budget and want that Google experience, the Pixel 5a might be your only choice. Rumor has it that the Pixel 6 series will be a high-end phone with a high price tag. Personally, I wouldn't recommend the Pixel 5a if having control over photos and videos is important to you. Because even though the computational photography is top tier, the manual controls are non-existent. But if that doesn't matter to you and you just want to take amazing point and shoot photos, then the Pixel 5a looks to be a pretty good option. And it should be a phone that will last quite a while, especially with the updated build quality improvements like the metal construction and IP rating. If you found this video helpful, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up. And if you want to support my channel, please subscribe. As usual, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.